you guys can introduce yourself if you like to, and just start at the beginning. What year it was, how you got into veganism, then just what happened.
All right. So my name is Casey. This is my wife, Gina.
Hello.
So for myself, I started a vegan diet. Originally, I started being vegetarian, strict vegetarian, about 15 years ago. My motivation for that was I was having some health problems. I was having severe eczema and and also staph infection. I would get staph infection in that from time to time. But the eczema was the worst. I would just get itchy rashes. I didn't know what was causing it, and because of the kind of ideas I'd heard growing up about meat being bad and so forth, I thought, well, it must be that's the unhealthy part of my diet. It must be something about my lifestyle. So that's what I tried to cut out. And so I went strict vegetarian, just milk and vegetables and fruits, no eggs, no meat. I think that's what I did for close to a year at first, and and then took it a step farther, going vegan. And I had some success with my health. The eczema kind of died down a bit, but it never really went away. So that was what got me into this. And then over the last 14, 15 years, I would say I spent all but a year of that as a vegetarian or vegan, very limited meat in that time, and at least half of that time as a vegan, half of it as a vegetarian. You want to go ahead and start with it?
Sure. So I went vegan in, I believe it was 2009, and I was 13 years old, and I went vegan right after my trip to Japan, when I decided to cut out having fish. And I had kind of always been a picky eater. I never liked eating like the crap that they served at school, and I never liked eating the like fake foods. And so I kind of would always eat my own thing, and I just felt like this emotional attachment to eating meat as being like I loved animals, and I felt like I kind of bought into the whole idea that it was better to eat plants than eat animals, basically. And a little while in, I was kind of feeling like a lot of the vegan foods I was eating didn't serve me very well. So I ended up just eating raw foods, like just basically fruits and vegetables, mostly fruit. And I felt really good for a while. I felt like I had eliminated a lot of the nonsense, and I felt really good for a while. But about 6 months in, I started to notice just like a very severe depression take on, and also I started to have brain fog and the beginnings of kind of joint pain and different issues like that. Even though I really believed that what I was doing was good, and like I had the focus in on it, there was something like I didn't realize it until later, but I was always like really hungry, and I was feeling less mental focus, and I was losing weight, which I thought was a good thing at the time, but now I realize that isn't really. Then, so basically, I continued to be vegan and just eating like whole foods. I started having some cooked foods later, and I continued to be vegan until about 2013 or 2014, which is when I started introducing dairy, because, well, basically we started kind of meeting some people that were kind of vegetarian, kind of Hindu people,
Mm-hmm.
and hanging out with them, and then I started eating the food there, and I actually felt a little better, even though there was a lot of grains and spices and stuff like that. I felt more fulfilled with the dairy and everything.
Yeah, I think the grains made my problems worse.
They did make my problems worse. One thing I didn't mention though is that at age 17, I got cancer. So I got a large tumor in my right leg, and I wasn't really worried about it because I didn't like buy into the whole idea of cancer being something that you have to fight. I felt like I had gotten poison ivy, and my body had then formed this hard lump. But there was like a lot of fear mongering. I had already moved out of my parents' home, but they got contacted about it, and I ended up getting like a surgery. But now that I look back at it, I don't feel like the excessive amounts of sugars and stuff like that was necessarily in the best interest, because it did continue to grow even though I was like eating like the healthiest, like raw um, fruits and vegetables and all the superfoods and everything, and it was just getting bigger. I haven't had any issues since then. I got pregnant with my first son
And that
in,
was right after the cancer.
yeah, right after the cancer in 2014. I'd done all of this fasting and everything, and so I was pretty depleted. So I actually, for the first time in those 4 or 5 years, I just craved red meat.
Mm-hmm.
About 2 months into my pregnancy, and then we started kind of doing like a Weston A. Price kind of diet. We would drive up to this farm and buy like lots of raw milk every week. We would buy liver and a little bit of meat and a lot of eggs. And I was just like eating so many eggs, and I was gaining a lot of weight, and I was feeling
But not
better in some
not a
ways.
lot of weight. I mean, you were just rebuilding like a
Yeah,
normal healthy
just
weight.
kind of like what's happening to me right now. But
Yeah.
it was my first pregnancy, and my son was very healthy. Like he's 5 now, and he's extremely intelligent. Like he's at like third grade level. He can read chapter books. He's very smart. But like as soon as I had the baby, then I was like, all right, I'm going back to raw foods. And then we just started juicing like ridiculous amounts of kale again, and I was going downhill actually. I was getting more joint pain, and I always told myself that it was detox, and that it was something to get through. But I never really lasted too long, more than a couple months doing that, because I just like with the nursing and the pregnancy, I feel like my body just wanted the nutrition. And so I went back to being vegetarian. I was still having all of the joint pain was getting worse. I had a lot of fatigue, brain fog, and just aches and pains, just feeling of overall kind of like sadness, like not feeling like myself. And that went on for a couple of years. I would go back and forth between vegetarian and vegan. And then sometimes I got pregnant with my daughter again, and then we started having some meat again, because I was like, I gotta have some red meat. I would have like dreams about it, and I was like, okay, that's gotta mean something. But for some reason, I told myself that I must have not been combining my foods right. I must have not been eating enough greens or beans or something. I'm like, maybe I was just not doing it right, and not like, maybe next time if I have more of the higher protein foods or something, then I won't have that craving. But of course that wasn't true. And it's just kind of very interesting, because I hadn't completely opened up to the idea of having animal foods, except for milk I felt okay with, but I wasn't convinced that it was good for me. Because there's just a little bit of, like lots of people say that dairy isn't very healthy. And anyways, onto my, when we were having my fourth son,
Your third, you mean?
my third son, yes, you're right.
Third child.
Yeah, my
second
third
son.
child, not my third son. Confusion. We were traveling, and I didn't know I was pregnant at first, so I actually went into the pregnancy after fasting, because I thought that fasting, juice fasting and stuff like that was going to assist me, because I was really not feeling great. I had joint pain, just fatigue, and I was just like, there's got to be some way to do this. And I just like, like I felt really good when I did the raw foods the first time, but I never got back to that before. So I always kept going back to that, and it would kind of be a little better, but not really. Yes, what do you say?
Well, you just reminded me, so I had the same experience. Like when I first decided to be vegan, I started eating raw vegan foods, and I felt a lot of improvement after a few months. And I think looking back, that was just from cutting out all of the grains and other processed foods that I'd been eating before. But at the time, it seemed to validate eating vegan, and especially raw vegan. So that was kind of always the ideal that we held, even though we weren't always maintaining it.
Yeah, that's actually how we met, was on a forum about raw foods.
Yeah, we met on it's kind of embarrassing, actually.
Well,
we met on the 30 bananas a day forum.
And everything happens for a reason, so it's all perfect. And yeah, so I had my baby, and I was eating vegan at this point, and I was just like, at this point I was really frustrated I was kind of blaming it on like, oh, I had all these kids so close together, and that's why I'm not feeling well.
And that pregnancy, we were mostly eating vegan.
Yeah.
Right?
My pregnancies went well.
The first two pregnancies, we'd eaten meat during both of them, right, at some point. But then the third one is really...
No, we ate meat. Remember when we were going to Tabitha's Way, we were getting the free stuff?
A little bit.
A little bit, but not much.
A little bit, yeah, when we first moved here, yeah.
But
But mostly it was vegan.
My pregnancies were great experiences. Like my birth process was all natural, easy, everything. But with my third son, even though it was 2 hours long and it was totally unassisted and it went no complications, like it was actually like the hardest one I ever had. And so like my son, then he was growing up, he was born at a decent weight. Like my first son was like 10.5 pounds, my daughter was 9.5, and he was 8.5 pounds. So he was born at a pretty healthy weight. But then, like a couple months in, he just seemed to be not gaining weight very well. I was feeding him breast milk. I actually started going to the work for the first time, which wasn't ideal. But I was feeding him breast milk. Somebody donated breast milk, and we were giving him goat's milk too, but it still wasn't, because I just felt like I wasn't making good quality milk. And even though I was eating as much as I could, I was even having some dairy, but it didn't seem to be sufficient. Like I started off vegan and I was like, this is not working. I'm going to try adding some dairy. And just he was like really small, not developing as well. He couldn't sit up at 6 months. He couldn't walk at a year. It took him up until we started eating meat where he could really start walking, actually. And so that was concerning to me. But I always just felt like maybe it's detox. I don't know, something. I don't know. And so I just kind of just like ignoring my natural instinct and natural knowing on it because of some ideology that I picked up and kind of got set in there. And even with the donated milk from someone that probably consumed a normal diet and the goat's milk, he was just not progressing normally. And so I was a little bit stressed about that. And then I ended up getting pregnant again with my fourth son, who's actually very, very healthy. But during this pregnancy, I went back to raw foods again for the latter half of the pregnancy. And somehow he's doing fantastic. I feel like I'd grown a lot in a lot of ways, and I eliminated a lot of the toxic things that I was having.
Yeah, and you were eating vegan up until his birth. But then it was just right after that we started eating meat again and everything.
So my son was good.
And then he started growing really quickly. So
Right.
I feel that he's getting a lot more nutrition through the breast milk than the previous children did.
Well, what I noticed at the end of my pregnancy is that in a couple months, my teeth were falling apart. My bones were hurting. My brain, like I couldn't think, I couldn't remember anything. I felt like my body had like literally sucked out all of my vital organs to put into the baby or something. I literally was like, I couldn't think of things. I went to staff this training that I always have like magnificent experiences in. And I was having such a hard time for the first time ever. I was like, I couldn't think. I couldn't hold people up. I didn't have the strength in my arms anymore. I hadn't gained weight towards the end of my pregnancy at all. I was just at the same weight. I started getting these very painful cavities in my teeth, even though I had just had all of these cavities worked on.
We were going to the dentist and they said they took care of everything. She went in a few months later and said, oh, you have like a whole bunch more.
I got like holes up here and it was like just like excruciating pain everywhere. And I was like...
And I was having the same experience with my teeth as well.
Yeah, and I was having like cravings for food again. And I was like, I was going to this like... So I was... attempting to eat just fruit.
Yeah, most of our history as vegan has always been in pursuit of health. So we would generally eat whole foods, a lot of fruit. We'd cook things from scratch, but then you were getting cravings. She was starting to get cravings, so she'd go to the store and buy vegan cheese.
Yeah, the fake thing.
Junk.
And I knew it wasn't healthy for me, but I was like, you know what? I don't want to go back to having animal foods. I'm done with that. I just had that like...
What do you think about the vegan YouTubers such as Ellen Fisher who claim to not eat any animal products even though she's been through pregnancies? Some of them even say that they don't crave anything. Is that possible?
I don't know. I mean, I only know my experience. And my experience was that as soon as I got pregnant, I did crave it, even though I hadn't before that. And I don't know, like, maybe I didn't have as many reserves built up or whatever, but I know that like my body definitely sent me clear signals when I was pregnant and nursing. Sometimes I listened, sometimes I didn't. It's easy I know in my experience it was easy for myself to lie to myself and say that like, oh, it's, just do it one time and then you'll be good or like whatever.
And I can say that like my mental state shifted when I would eat vegan and I would feel that was the message I wanted to promote to people out of good intent, but I would do it even though maybe sometimes I was not eating. Like I might have cheese or milk or something. I would still be promoting to people that you should eat vegan. This is the best. This is what I do. It's all I need. Because that's what I felt. I really believed that. I believed in that moment that is all I needed. And these other things weren't doing any good for me. They were just my weakness, if that makes sense. And I think that's a trap a lot of people fall into. So, maybe they're getting some extra nutrition from cheating on their diet, but they don't think that that's nutrition. They think it's just something bad.
Right. Like a lot of the vegans talk about taste. So maybe they cheat, but they believe that it's just for the taste. Good old cheese that I used to eat, even though they're actually craving the nutrients, of course, in the cheese.
Right, and that's just like a story that we tell ourselves that we've heard from somebody
Yeah.
else, but really like that's just covering up the natural instinct, like the natural knowing about
Yeah,
something.
because when she started getting vegan cheese, it's not like
It didn't do
it would never
anything.
satisfy
It was
you.
just like made me sick.
And then
And I was like,
when
I
you
don't
have
want to have
some
that
real
again.
milk or real dairy, then
Yeah, I finally
it's
decided after staffing that training, I was like, I just called him and I was like, you know what? I'm a powerful creator. I'm going to have some cheese tonight. And then he went out to the store and got some the next day. And I was like, yes, finally. It felt really good because I felt like I finally let go of the
Mhm.
blockage to my natural knowing. And then it took me a little while more to get past the meat. So this was last year when I made that shift and I had my last son.
Early November, right?
Yeah,
Or-
so in November, like we started going up. There's like a farm where we get some raw milk about like an hour north of here, and they also like they have like they process their own meat and stuff like that. So we went and got a tour of the farm, and then we saw like the carcasses hanging up, and then I started crying for a little while because I just like. But after that, I was done. It wasn't sad anymore. Like
Yeah.
the whole story, I finally let it go, if that makes sense, and then I was like just grateful for it, and I was like my natural knowing. I honor myself first, and that's how I honor every living thing, really. Um, and so the improvements that I felt. So in November we started eating some.
Well, do you want me to go through my history a little bit
Yeah,
first?
yeah, you can go first.
Because I only said a little earlier, so let's come back to that.
Mhm.
So for myself, like I said, my main issue physically was eczema. At some points, it would break out from neck to toe, and at times it would get staph infected, and that would become a major issue. I actually ended up in the hospital at one point. They wanted to amputate both of my legs because of how bad the staph infection was, and I left. I figured out a way to cure the staph on my own. Fortunately, somehow survived that mess. But um, all of my experiments with diet were kind of motivated by trying to get rid of that and other health issues as well, but that was the main one. And I found a lot of success, like I said, when we would do like just raw foods, because I think I was not eating any grains. I think grains was a big part of it. Knowing what I do now, looking back, I think grains are probably the worst thing for my skin. When we would just eat fruits, it would not go completely away, but it would become very small, just a minor annoyance. There were times when I tried all different diets. Before I met her, I tried like pescatarian, I tried macrobiotics. That was the worst. And now looking back, it makes sense because I was eating tons of grains and seed oils, and that was when I had the worst experiences of my life with my skin.
Yeah, I did macrobiotics when I was 12.
Wow.
It didn't work very
Yeah.
well.
So, but I got it kind of manageable with just eating lots of whole foods and limited amounts of grain and so
Yeah,
forth.
like
And yeah, I think the most success I had eating vegetarian or vegan was with eating raw fruitarian, but that was very difficult to maintain, and I would lose a lot of weight. I was 25 pounds lighter than I am now, and so we would do that for periods, but they'd usually be less than a year, right?
I feel like it was never longer than 6 months, and we would
Yeah.
not be like we would
I
always
would
end
say
up eating something else during it.
I
Like
would
we
say
would
like
not be
6
able
to
to
8
maintain
months.
it.
Yeah.
It's like I would be so hungry all the time, like just eating only fruit.
Yeah.
And then like even one time we got like a case of avocados and like ate all the avocados in 1 week, and I was still hungry. It didn't do anything.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I was just telling myself that maybe like it's some parasite or I don't know, like, but I didn't feel satisfied, and it was definitely like constantly thinking about food after a couple months doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing like how many excuses I tried to look for in that time. Like it must be some kind of parasite. So we tried to do all these anti-parasitic herbs that just made us worse. Or something wrong, this is wrong. And it's like the last thing we wanted to think about was the diet that we thought was good must be the problem. But that was actually a big part of what opened my eyes. So I've been dealing with this itchy skin rash for the better part of 15 years. And then last fall, she started to get a skin rash as well that was itchy. A little different, but
Yeah, it's more like
similar.
hives.
And she'd never had that before, and she's a lot younger, and I've been having this. So I'm like, well, we're eating the same foods. That's really the only thing that we could attribute to it. So I believe now is probably all the plant toxins.
Yeah. So when we stopped having I stopped having all the vegetables and everything from the raw food diet, and then I started getting like hives everywhere. And then I've still been getting them, but it's been getting progressively better over time. So I feel like it's probably the oxalate dumping or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's definitely something that is improving.
Yeah. So when we first we first decided to start eating meat, it didn't actually go very well
No. Oh,
because
yeah.
we hadn't had it in so long. And then we went and got like some bacon and I don't remember what else. Sausage or something,
yeah,
some
and
eggs.
fish.
And we ate all this food and just like our bodies didn't really know how to handle it. So it just like it got sick. And then said, okay, that was a bad idea. Went back to being vegan for about a week. And then, but even though we got sick, there was a feeling, a shift in the body. You know, it's just a feeling of contentedness, a lifting of brain fog that you experienced a lot of, just generally feeling better. And then that started to get a little, I just noticed in that week, started getting a little worse. So we decided to try it again. And so we did a little more cautiously and then did fine and just felt great.
Yeah, I think
So,
subconsciously, I was wanting to do that. I didn't want to eat the fruit anymore.
yeah,
I just I don't want to eat another apple ever again. That's how I felt in the moment, anyways.
yeah.
So
Well,
subconsciously, I was wanting to
yeah,
encourage him and let's do something else.
yeah. And when we would eat some, I would realize that when we would eat some animal foods, I wouldn't really want all the fruit and other stuff. So it was just, I wouldn't eat anymore. I'd be satiated for the day. And that was something I wasn't used to because
Hmm.
as when we were eating just vegan foods, I was eating all the time just to stay full. And
Yeah, I
never
would eat
really,
so if I was eating grains or something, I would eat several bowls full and I would still not feel satisfied, but my stomach would feel full. And I always thought maybe I just eat a lot or something. But
mhm,
since I've started having just all or mostly animal foods, I don't eat that much and I feel great. I have energy.
yeah,
I could eat one time a day and be fine. I do that sometimes. Whereas that I had tried to do that before because it takes time to prepare food. I want to do other stuff in my life,
yeah,
but it never worked out because I would always get so hungry and want to eat two or
yeah.
three times.
And there's been just continual healing since we started eating meat. It was actually only about a week after we started eating meat on a daily basis that we started eating it raw. And I think that, and we haven't had only raw meat, but we did only raw meat for a couple of months,
Yeah, we'll probably
and
go back to it.
now we do kind of both.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of healing, and like she said, she's continued to have like some rashes and so forth, and as have I, but they've gone lesser and lesser and lesser. And now mine's like completely gone. I think
Mhm.
you had a rash all over your face.
Oh
That's
yeah,
pretty
my
much
eyes.
gone.
My eyes were so getting dry and bumpy. This first started this one, and then this one was starting to get it too, and then it just started to go away. Now it's all gone.
Yeah,
And even though I believed in what I was doing, I had the mental, I was doing a lot of things in my life outside of what I was eating that were great, but my health was still not improving. So it wasn't enough for my mind and my spirit to be in a good space when my food was out of alignment. And one thing I know is that when I'm out of integrity in one area of my life, everything else is affected too. And when
mm,
I'm not honoring my natural knowing on something, that affects every area of my life.
yeah.
Besides the parasite cleanses, did you use anything else? Did you take any supplements? Any of that stuff?
We did a little supplements here and there, but not very much. Like
I
sometimes
did,
we
I
would
did.
take a vitamin or a B12, but never with regularity. I
Not the whole
didn't.
time, but I did take B12 a couple times. We got two bottles ever, and we shared them, I
Yeah,
think. And then I got a prenatal during one or two of my pregnancies, which now looking back, it's silly, but at the time I didn't know better, I
yeah,
guess.
but definitely
And
not like
I did a
every
lot of
day.
herbs. We did a lot of herbal teas,
In the
a lot
beginning,
of
yeah,
herbs.
like after we first met and she was going through the cancer stuff,
Yeah.
we were trying to use like different herbal formulas from like Dr. Morse, and that was a disaster as well.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, there's this one for your stomach to clean it out. It's so bitter and really disgusting.
yeah,
I don't remember what all I took, but I know we've taken a lot of different herbs over the years, and that's something that we when we were still
but
fruitarian,
it's like
we
they
just gave them all
always,
away. We're like, this
yeah,
isn't working.
they always made me feel worse when I would have them. So We never took them very regularly and just ended up giving a lot of stuff away.
Did you believe that you should naturally get everything you need from plants?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought that ideally I should get everything should come from the diet, right? And yeah, there's
And
some
then
stories about the soil's not good enough, that's why the food's not good or so forth. But we were getting like, we were always buying organic fruits and like the best quality we could find.
which is
So,
often not that great in the winter time in Utah.
and
But
yeah,
but yeah.
and eating like a lot. We're eating a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I had been craving fats. I always start to crave fats when eating vegan,
yeah,
because we didn't really do vegetable oils and stuff like that, or at least we would attempt to avoid them as much as
not
possible.
too much, but a
Like we
little
would
bit.
have it, like sometimes we'd go out to eat because we're starving or something, but like I knew that like I just had this kind of knowing that fats was something that was good for me, but I wasn't.
Mm.
There's not really like a good plant source of fats. Like I don't feel like
Yeah.
nuts and seeds are a great
And see,
thing to
I
have,
don't
and
feel that I knew that. I didn't accept that until quite recently. When I grew up, even though my family ate meat, we had fairly little of it, and there's all this media saying, meat's bad, fat's bad, and so that's just what I assumed was truth, until I actually started eating a lot of meat and especially a lot of fat, and seeing that it's having no harmful effect on me.
I feel like one of the biggest things I've noticed since November, like positive health change, has been my mind. Like
Oh,
I
absolutely.
feel like my brain
Yeah.
is growing. Like I can literally feel it growing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Because I really feel like my pregnancy had totally been the opposite of my last pregnancy. And thank goodness my baby is super healthy. He's doing amazing. He's kind of like my first son, where he's growing very quickly and very smart. But for me, I just felt completely incompetent. Like I literally felt like I was starting to get dementia or something. Like I couldn't remember stuff. I was like very mentally weird, and I didn't feel like myself. I felt so empty. And then just a couple months in now, I'm feeling pretty much back to normal.
There was a
Um,
study about vegan brain shrinking, so it could
Yeah.
literally be true that it's actually growing. It's repairing itself now with the
Yeah.
cholesterol B12 and so on.
I probably just ran out of my reserves of cholesterol and it had to go into my brain or something. Who knows? But
Yeah.
another thing I've noticed is not only my skin has been a lot healthier. It was so dry. I was having all these rashes, and like really bad histamine reactions or oxalate or whatever. Like I was getting like big giant mosquito bumps all over my body. Now it's like just a couple little bumps. It's and then my energy. I'm able to exercise,
Mm.
get up early, just do everything that I want to do in my life, and I feel like I'm getting stronger. I'm gaining muscle.
Yeah, that's
My
definitely been
teeth
the case for me.
sensitivity. I feel like my teeth are healing. They're getting better. I can actually
Or at
brush
least not as
them.
sensitive.
They're not all the way healed, but I had some pretty big holes, so I expect it might take some time. Those are some of the main things I've noticed. Also, my son, who was not gaining weight, he was like 16 or 17 pounds. Like he was very underweight, and his teeth weren't coming out. Like he was behind in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We started giving him meat, and then he got the strength to stand up, start talking. He gained like 4 pounds in the past couple months, and he's like, now he's at a normal weight,
And also
and
his
intelligence and everything.
and he's happy now. Like before he was like, we were feeling depressed. He was also obviously depressed. He just like
He would throw himself back
throw
and
fits.
just,
He'd
yeah.
throw himself on the ground and whatnot. And now he's happy to be alive. Like it's really obvious in a
He wakes
child.
up smiling. Like he
So-
used to be like miserable. Like I was so stressed out about it because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But now he wakes up. He's happy all the time. He barely ever like even feels anything, has any issues, right? Like only if he wants some food or something. But like he's just has this desire to learn. He's speaking more. I feel like he's like at a normal place for his age
Yeah.
now. Whereas before he was like, I was like, maybe he's not going to make it or something. I was like,
Yeah.
actually,
And that was another factor for us too. Like when we started eating meats, of course, we shared it with the kids, and they just loved them. And then when they would eat, we'd ask them, "What do you want? Do you want more fruit? Do you want some meat?" They'd want the meat, so that's what we stuck with. If it's children aren't going to fall for all this dogma, they're just going to go with what satisfies them, right?
and they don't have like the whole aversion to eating like foods that were hard for me at first. Like I liked liver a lot, so eating like the raw liver was super easy. But like the muscle meat and the fat like took me a little while to get used to. But like kids really like it. They just like, my daughter prefers it, you know, and
Where do you think this aversion comes from? Is there some kind of brainwashing or manipulating out there, maybe from the media, schools, or what is it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I mean, it's just what I grew up with at school, watching TV, all the commercials, everything's kind of based around this premise that if you eat a lot of meat, you're going to be fat. Eating
the
fat
germs
will
and
make you
stuff,
fat.
right? Like all the germs and bacteria
Oh, there's
and
so
the
much
raw foods.
phobia, right? People
Cook it
tell you have
thoroughly.
to cook everything to death because otherwise you'll get sick.
I
And
always believe that like animal foods were not safe to eat raw, just because that's what I'd always been told. Even though I used to love sushi, and I'd eaten some, like I think I ate like a steak tartare one time when I was younger or something. We traveled a lot to France and stuff, so I had eaten different kinds of things. And where my family's from, they pretty much just eat meat. Like, at least traditionally, they're cowboys and they just eat meat in Uruguay. So I grew up eating a lot of that, but then when we moved to, since my parents had moved to the United States, we kind of assimilated the ideas here. And I was a little bit worried about raw meat at first because I felt like it would make me sick, like it might be contaminated or something, but then I realized that at least with the beef and the fish and stuff, it doesn't seem to be true. But there's still a couple things that I'm not ready to eat. I tell myself that I'm not ready to eat raw yet because
Right.
like pork, for example, I haven't eaten it
Likewise.
raw yet, even though we have a pretty good source here. So I think there's just like, it's just those beliefs that we have that in order to break it down, sometimes it takes personal experience and
Yeah.
then seeing that, oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
When we first started eating raw meat, though, we did get sick for a little while. All the kids started throwing up every day, but then we were fine once we adjusted to it.
Oh,
It
the,
was
the
just-
kids did.
yeah, the kids were
I
throwing
didn't
up.
get sick.
I was a
never got
little
sick.
bit sick, but
The only
not
time
too
I got
much.
sick is when we first had it was cooked meat,
Yeah.
but it was after we hadn't had it in forever, and I think I just ate too much, and my system didn't know how to handle it.
Well, beliefs are powerful, right? Like they can affect how we taste things, how we smell things, how we think about things, and how we react to things even. Like if you really think that something's going to make you sick, it's probably going to create some kind of a negative reaction. And I feel like in this day and age, in this culture, it takes being brave and taking a risk to find that out for yourself.
Yeah.
But it's great. Like I think that at least
Yeah.
for beef and lamb and fish, it seems to be working really
It's
well.
crazy now. Like just I'll go to the store, like sometimes to buy meat, and there's now the plant-based meat mixed in the meat section. Like no vegetarian's gonna go look in the meat section to find some vegan meat, right? So they're putting it there just to try to get to people that maybe have this idea that, oh, maybe it's a little healthier, I'll give it a try. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I feel
really
like
weird to
what
me because
ultimately-
like I saw, it's like all the stores started doing it at the same time, like totally different chains, and they all started doing the same kind of marketing of these Beyond Meat and other meat substitutes. Before they never did it, and now all of a sudden they all start at the same time doing it. So
Those are not, like, I never
It's-
felt good eating fish.
it does
and
seem
meat.
like
It
there's
always made
some
me
kind
sick,
of
so-
some kind of agenda going on to me a little bit.
I once saw a woman who's around 70 years old looking for ice cream, and she was choosing the soy ice cream, and she said that it's healthier. So
Yeah.
even the older generations are now brainwashed to believe that.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, even people that eat meat, like, believe that and will go for having less meat and having meat alternatives or dairy
Yeah.
alternatives. Like, for me, what it took was just to look back and see what did the indigenous people used to eat? Like, what could I naturally eat living here without having to fly something or make something in a lab?
And yeah, you
or-
might get a little bit of fruit here and there, but in the winter time, there's no fruit here. So that's why, like right now, we've pretty much just been eating meat, milk, eggs. But I'm sure, once the fruit is in season, then that's when I intend to like eat some, but not in the kind of quantities we were, which is just ridiculous.
Like 6 watermelons.
We were buying we were buying fruit by the
cases of
case,
fruit, yeah.
like from a wholesaler. We would go and get like 8-10 cases of
Of
fruit at a
melons
time.
and apples, and then like a lot of the time it just wasn't even good because it wasn't ripe.
Yeah.
But
And
they
it's
still
from all
have-
over the world, right? It's like this is from Mexico and this is from wherever. It's totally not
Right.
sustainable.
And most of it's not even like in season except out of the summer, even if it's from somewhere else. Like,
And then the other thing that I realized in doing all this research was It's not that I ever did the vegan diet for the animals, but that was a nice extra, like a bonus point, basically. Like I got into it for health, but a lot of people do it because they think they're saving all these animals. And now that we bought a full cow, like all the meat from one cow, and I went there when it was slaughtered. We bought it directly from the farmer and everything. And that's like enough meat for us, our whole family, 4 kids, and us to eat for, I don't know, 3, 4 months, maybe a little less. I don't know how long exactly, but it's a lot. And I'm sure that all of this agriculture is, for one thing, it's destroying the natural habitat for a lot of animals. And then they're putting all these pesticides and everything else to protect it. And then when they harvest, they're killing more animals. So I can live off of one animal for months, feed the whole family, or I don't know. It's just kind of weird how disconnected people are. They think that they're saving animals by their food choices, and they're really not.
And just like as far as we were able to get this cow, and we got like all of the organs, including the brain and everything. Well, we just got the head. We had to open up the brain and everything. But it was just a really beautiful experience to use all of the animal.
Yeah, and have a personal connection with that animal. Like at least you didn't, but you saw a picture of it. But I was there for the slaughter. Like I went and I saw it and whatever. So I thought it would be a lot more difficult, and then when I actually did that, I just realized it's really nice to have a personal connection to the food that I'm eating now. Like I value it.
Would you say that it's easier for the ethical vegans to quit veganism, or more so for the ones who focus on health? Because, of course, for the ones who are involved in the ethics, it's really hard for them to snap out of it, right? Whereas the ones who notice that their health is going down, it may be easier. What do you think?
Yeah, my experience was for health. Even with that, it was hard.
Because the two get jumbled up together. Like
they do.
You do one, and then the other thing starts to
grow.
And
all the books I'd read and videos I'd watched and so forth for years had just reiterated that animal foods are bad, and this is what's good, and you're just not doing it right if you're having some problems. So.
Yeah, I personally feel like that it can kind of be a hazy line between the two, the ethical and the health.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing it, it's still like a belief system that you have, and it just really depends on how much you believe in it, I guess. Like, I really chose to take it in and make it kind of a part of my belief system. So it was really difficult for me to let it go until I decided to. But all it takes is a choice, and it just takes seeing, okay, this is working, this is not working. It's really simple. It's just getting out of the way. Yeah. And for me, just some of the experiences that I've had in this past year, trainings I've done and stuff, have allowed me to see that there's not a right or a wrong way to do things. I just look at things as how they're working for me and my natural instinct, and go from there. So
that's all it comes down to, right? It's getting outside of the wrong and right judgments.
Yeah, or the labels or the dogmas.
But I think because if one is able to look objectively at the ethics behind it, like if I don't want to cause suffering to animals, well, you'll cause less suffering by eating animals than not eating animals. I believe, based on the research I've done, and just seeing it, right?
And less suffering to people too.
Like I've lived in rural areas surrounded by farms, and I know like the farmers are going to go, and if there's something eating their crops, they're going to shoot it, or they're going to kill it somehow. They're going to set traps.
Well, like most of the forest in this country's been cut down, and now we just have a bunch of like potato fields and corn and soy and wheat, and like just driving through, like the mountainous areas are still forested, but like the flat areas have been cleared for
and then people try to say like most of the food we grow is fed to animals, but it's actually the waste products that humans don't want to eat anyways that are fed to animals. So there's so much skewed statistics, and I feel like if the people that were in it for ethical reasons actually took an honest look at the impact of their choices, and it would be easy for them, but easier said than done.
Yeah, it's just choosing to just listen to your heart. Listen to my heart, and if anyone chooses to really go inside and find out what the natural truth is, it's there. Like we all know what I used to think like, what's the healthiest food? Like I've been trying all these years to find out what the healthiest food is, but like we all know what it is. It's innate within us. Like no one can take that away from us. like people can try with all of this like ideologies and just whatever stuff I learned in school and from my parents and whatever. But the inner knowing is still there. It's just a matter of whether we choose to listen to it or not.
Yeah. When we first started eating meat again, we had a friend that was vegan. She actually went vegan like years after I did, and when we met, she wasn't vegan yet. But she got so upset at me because I wasn't vegan anymore, and
Yeah, he posted on Facebook, it was like, no longer vegan, gone raw primal or something.
yeah. And she's had a lot of problems with that. And then meanwhile, she's posting like about her health problems she's having, like a lot of fatigue. I don't remember what else. She was having a lot of different health problems, and I wrote and I said, this is kind of why I shifted, because I was having problems like this. I was having a lot of fatigue. I mean, towards the end, we were sleeping like more than 12 hours every night.
Mm-hmm.
So more than 50% of my life was just sleep because I was tired all the time. And then when I was awake, I'd be tired.
We would just like lay around a lot of the time.
Yeah, and then when we were awake,
Yeah.
we'd just be lazy. Like I wouldn't want to get up and go do things. And now I'm able to just go and
have a normal life.
yeah, have a normal life.
Not
And
normal, but
yeah, so that's been a big thing, is just motivation. So I find that for me, it was just a matter of coming to that point as we did in November and saying like, let's just give it a try and see what the results are. We can always change back.
yeah, I had this idea. Well, first of all, we heard about, there's like two people on YouTube that we had watched. There was Asra Khanlu, and then I think the Strong Sisters, that they had made some videos about eating like a raw carnivore diet, right? And so I was like, I've never done that before. It's
Yeah.
like the one thing I haven't done is
She
like,
kind of was joking, like,
No,
that's the one extreme we've never tried. Maybe it's worth a
well,
shot.
I really did want to try it because I was really fed up with not having any results. And then I was like, oh, wow, they bought a whole cow. Maybe I haven't done that before. And then now we've done it. And
at first I was watching these things just because I thought it was absurd. Like,
right.
And then I kept watching and like, okay, maybe it's actually worth a shot.
Right. Like, I remember you said that well, there's that one video about the, was it Derek Nance or something?
Yeah, Derek Nance was the first video I'd seen of anybody eating raw meat.
And I just came home one day and he was watching videos with the kids and they were like, oh yeah, and then my daughter wanted to try it or something.
Yeah, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen. And I was just watching it for entertainment. But then you brought it up and it's like, yeah, well, we've never tried that. And I had to admit that to myself. Like, I don't have the experience to know if it works, so why am I judging it, right? And what I'm doing clearly isn't working. So what the heck? Let's give it a shot.
Right. I feel like I had really gotten into veganism when I was younger, and I had a good friend that was too, which kind of reinforced it. But like I kind of knew that there was this judgment there, but I told myself that I was like, especially later when we were together, like I told myself I was not judgmental, but I would still feel like that. Like I wouldn't want my kids to eat meat, or I would like say like, you know what, most people eat meat, but we're not going to do that because that's not a nice thing to do. And there's that kind of like, I don't know, it's like a right, wrong, like I feel like you've said it's kind of like a religion.
It is. It is.
And even
when you try to not be a part of that religion, it's still...
Yeah, like if all I naturally want to eat is fruit, and that's just naturally what I want to eat, then great. But like there doesn't have to be a belief system or a right, wrong about it. Like it's not right to eat one thing and wrong to eat another thing. Some things might affect me in one way and then others might in another way.
The difference for me now is like I can sit down with a plate of beef or whatever, and a friend next to me can be eating pasta or something, and it's fine. That's your choice. If as a vegan, if I was sitting down eating a vegan food and they were eating meat, I would, even if I was trying to be outwardly non-judgmental, not say anything about it, it would bother me, and I wouldn't want to be that person when they're eating, right? So,
right. There's like a separation kind of thing that occurs. It's like I'm different from other people, or, but yeah, I don't know. Like I've noticed that it's becoming even more popular now. A lot of people that I know are going whole food, plant-based or whatever, and I don't know. I feel like there's just it's, for me, a big part of it was the spiritual side of it. So like, we studied Hinduism together for a while, and they're vegetarian primarily. They're not vegan, right? But there's this idea of nonviolence and
the karma and all that.
Right. And so I kind of like, had it misinterpreted that for a long time, I guess, which is kind of what held me away from eating meat, even when we would eat it and I would feel better. I would
Yeah.
then just feel like it's important for me to do the least harm possible. So this is the way it has to look. And I didn't really realize what that meant.
Yeah. But that's kind of strange too, because historically, right, they weren't vegetarian.
No.
And I think on your channel, you've actually indicated like some of the older
Yeah.
parts of scriptures where it promotes eating meat, but modern
But
day
they're definitely
Hindus
not
are
vegan.
predominantly
I
vegetarian.
mean, like, I really
Yeah.
like the stories about Krishna and stuff like that. And he just like drinks milk all day. Like
He
he's
eats
not
butter.
vegan. He's like stealing butter from people and like raw milk and yogurt.
Yeah.
And like there's like so many cows. And so it's definitely not.
But he also ate meat. So.
Yeah, and then in the later stories, like, yeah, they're hunters, they're kings and warriors, and they hunt.
When as a vegan you see somebody eating meat, would you say that deep down it's some kind of jealousy also? That you actually maybe want to eat meat, but you're not allowed to, or you don't allow yourself to eat it? Maybe subconsciously, is it something like that?
Might be.
I think for myself, no. I really convinced myself it was gross. That's what I
Okay.
myself is disgusting. Like that's not food. That's not something you should put in your body. Right?
Even if I didn't
The
say
whole-
that, though, it would still be like, huh. I was just like, I was surrounded by all these people that are like amazing people that are very powerful people, and they eat meat. And I was like, huh, how are they so powerful and loving if they're eating meat? Like, it doesn't make
Right.
sense. But then,
Yeah, because like at least what they say in Hinduism, which we studied for a while, is like if you eat meat, it makes you angry. You take on the negative emotions the animal had
Right.
when they were slaughtered, and this.
But
And
then I didn't find that to be true because
No.
I was just surrounded by people that were like,
No, no,
wow,
no.
this is
It's
a
been-
powerful person, and they eat meat.
yeah, it's been completely
So-
the opposite
Yeah.
because like as a vegan, I had so much anxiety and impatience and anger and frustration, and now I'm just very clear and level and more patient. It's like a combination of being both more patient and more motivated. So I get up and I do more, but I don't feel as emotionally unstable. Like I don't get upset anymore. I'm just feeling at peace all the time.
Right. So this is why vegans, of course, also don't like to see others eating meat because they're just generally anxious and so on. Yeah.
Well, if I really am honest with myself, like I would be like eating I just like, even though right now I don't eat the same foods that most people eat anyways, like I'm eating like meat or whatever, but there was, when I was vegan, there was just kind of like just this separation occurring inside of me, like a kind of like a wall that came up. Even if I was like pretending it wasn't there, like now that I look back on it, it's there, and I'm able to be a lot more accepting and open of whatever anyone chooses, by having let go of the belief system of this is right and this is wrong, or this is worse and this is better, because now I know that like we're all learning on our whatever works for us, and there's not anything that's wrong. It's not bad to eat meat, right? Like it's not hurting me or anybody
Yeah.
else.
It's not bad to eat tofu. It's just stupid.
Right.
Yeah,
You're
it's
not judgmental. Yeah, I get what you mean.
And
It's just a
I
whole
mean,
different
yeah.
mindset when you're mentally sane,
Sound like
so
a-
to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, it might sound judgmental when I say stupid, but I mean that in like it's stupid because it's not gonna promote your health.
And also the cool thing is that because I'm not so hungry all the time, I'm not thinking about food most of my day. Like I just
Right.
eat when I eat, and then like it's not a dominant aspect of my life, which it did used to be. And I thought that was normal because I grew up on a mostly plant-based diet all my life, and then was being vegetarian at a young age. So I thought it was normal for me to be hungry all the time and like to like be thinking about food. Even though I did a lot of fasting and stuff, I was
Yeah.
just still like food was a big thing in my life. And now I'm able to focus on my passions and on like whatever it is that I choose to do to put my energy towards instead of food. So
Yeah, and I told my people would tell me like, oh, you just have a high metabolism. That's why you have to eat a lot. Like because I would eat 5,000-6,000 calories a day at times.
and you'd not gain any weight.
And not gain any weight at
And
all.
I didn't gain any weight, but during this last pregnancy, I was 145 pounds. One month later, I was 145 pounds. 1 month later, and I was like, maybe I'm letting go of some detox or something. But
Yeah.
and I told myself it was fine. But towards the end of it, I was really surprised that I didn't gain weight because I felt like I was eating as much as I could. And now I've gained I've gotten back to my healthy normal weight in just like a couple months, and
Yeah.
it's all good. So
Yeah, so when we started eating meat, like I was down to 135 pounds, 5'11", and within 1 month I was up to 170, and then I stayed right around 170 ever since then. So my body just kind of naturally returned to its ideal weight, and it's just stayed there.
me too.
And it doesn't matter how much meat or fat I eat. Like we eat a pretty high fat percentage.
Yeah, but
Um,
there's just like there's a
and
weird, just kind of societal thing about it being better to be like really skinny or something. So I always just felt like, oh, it must be healthy. Like most people are just like unhealthy or whatever. I feel like I used to, I really liked like older paintings and stuff like that, and they would kind of venerate the female figure as being like a little like a normal size basically. But in the modern day, there's more of a focus on the very skinny, which I do feel like it is kind of like malnourishment and
yeah,
just not being fed proper foods. It's like if you go to a place that's been less touched by modern society, um, people are just like a little bit more normal looking, you know, and more rounded and healthy, and they have a reserve and they have muscle and um,
yeah, it's surprising to me how many, like there's a lot of really skinny vegans, and I don't understand how they can consider themselves healthy. And it's becoming more apparent now. I think now that there's been more vegans on YouTube for a number of years, there's more and more of that happening. And it's
right.
like, how can you think this is good?
Because when we first started, it was kind of new-ish. Well, when I
Yeah,
first started, it was kind of new, like the whole raw food thing. There wasn't that many, like most people had just started doing it, right? But now it's been 10 years and like people have developed health problems or gone downhill in many different
yeah,
ways. Whereas at the time, it just seemed, I don't know, it's just a very new thing, which is kind of interesting.
A lot of people comment on the pyramid series that the vegans just don't eat enough, even though a lot of them, just like you, ate 4,000, 5,000 calories a day, but they don't understand that the food is not digestible, that you gotta convert the sugar to fat in the liver and all of the stuff which not everybody can do. So it doesn't matter
yeah,
how much you eat, you may still even lose weight.
yeah,
Right. But still be bloated or full all the time. And it's like, how much can you possibly put in, like eat in a day? It's even with the more denser foods like grains and beans, like those for me always caused issues. But even eating those foods, like it's difficult to get full. Not just with the fruits and stuff, but like even if you're pouring vegetable oil on there. So it seems to me like it's just not getting used by the body. Um, Probably for most people, or at least somewhere down the line, it'll start to get harder and harder. That was my experience, at least.
mm,
I didn't realize it, and I didn't realize about like I used to think that like greens were really healthy, and I would eat like we would do a lot of juicing and kale and spinach and all that stuff, and now I'm like, okay, no, it's
yeah,
definitely not something that I would naturally
yeah.
want
And I
to eat.
think that's why now there's still some, now that we're not eating vegan foods, I think there's actual detox going on, like when you get the oxalate dumping symptoms,
Yeah,
like the rash when it comes. But the difference is when it comes now, it comes and it goes, and then maybe some days later it'll come again. But
it's continuously getting better for the first
yeah, and
time,
it's
rather
always
than
less.
like
It's always
detox
less.
symptoms are continuously getting
Yeah,
worse.
yeah,
That's a good sign.
yeah. That was the thing with eating vegan diet. I think the fruit was not too bad, but if we would eat like green juice especially, or uh, a lot of leafy vegetables, right? It would just like, oh, I'm detoxing, but I'm getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, because
So
I didn't use to juice until I met him a couple, two or 3 years into, no, maybe my third year of veganism.
yeah,
I didn't really do juicing
I
very
didn't
much.
either. We
But then
started
we
that
started doing
together.
that together, and I just got, like, I remember I got so sick the first time. Like, he made like a really intense, like, cilantro juice, like straight cilantro. I got so sick from that. But then I just, like, for some reason, I thought it was a good thing. I don't know. But now, like, even when we were doing raw foods this past year, we decided to stop juicing because, like, we tried, like, having, like, juice of different greens and stuff, and it was
Yeah,
very clearly, like,
yeah,
not working. So,
yeah. I remember we had a friend visiting one day, and he's a, I don't know I don't think he's vegan, but he's mostly vegan. He's vegetarian, and So I had some wheatgrass at the time that I was juicing, so I made a whole bunch of wheatgrass juice. I gave him a big cup of it, and he was throwing up in the toilet for like an hour.
Oh.
And my belief at the time was, well, that's because of how toxic his body is. He's out all
So
this, he's
I
getting
mean,
out some toxins he has stored, and this is a really healthy thing for him.
we used to see this Swami, like this Indian guy, and he said that greens are cow food, not human food. And now that
Yeah.
makes sense to me.
Did you have any other vegan friends, any contacts? How did they react to you guys quitting? Or did you see anybody else quit in the time when you were vegan?
So we didn't have a lot.
I had a friend
I had a few, but
when I was younger, but she stopped talking to me because I had children. So she just had a
Yeah.
lot of like the
She was
whole
in,
anti-population kind of thing, like people are bad.
Right.
And the one friend that you mentioned,
yeah,
and then I know a couple other people that are vegan or have just recently went vegan, but um, they're friends where it doesn't matter. Like
they're
some people
not they're
anti
not
pack
that
and
much
stuff.
they're not that much into it yet, so they don't
Well,
have that.
yeah, or it's just it's not the focus of our. It has never been it's not what brought us together as friends.
Right.
So it doesn't really matter. Like I've got lots of friends and I don't really care what they eat, you know. But I have noticed that and just like one thing that has been an observation is that I have noticed that some of the people that have been vegan for a longer term tend to have a little bit of a slower brain function, if that makes sense. To be a little bit like more skinny and just like maybe I noticed that in myself. So that's why now I'm able to maybe notice it in other
Yeah.
people because I noticed that I was getting really, really skinny and I couldn't like when people would talk to me like it just felt weird like I didn't
Yeah,
really
sluggish in
just like
response and
my brain
everything.
was the gears were going really
Yeah.
slow or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny now. Like I know what you mean because I can do that same thing where I'll meet somebody and I can just tell like either you're a vegan or you're eating mostly vegan foods because you're skinny, your responses are slow, your brain's not functioning right. Like I've been there too. So
Yeah, and then there's people that are not even that not particularly healthy that eat maybe a lot of like processed foods or whatever, but they're doing lots better
yeah,
in some ways. And I don't know what that is. And it's not better or worse, but I've just noticed certain aspects of myself that I had as a vegan that now I no longer have that I can then see in others. But I also notice another thing I notice is that there's a like very enthusiastic about it and like wanting to preach it kind of thing. And like, wow, this is so great that I've noticed in people that are vegan that like they want to talk about it a lot too.
Yeah. yeah.
Anything else you would like to add? Any special experience during the time? Anything you learned?
You were talking about vegans on YouTube having children earlier, and you know, it made me think of there's at least certain people I know, like Aga in America is one of them, and they have children and they're vegan, but their children look like our malnourished son looked. And like since we started feeding him properly, now he's like not looking that way anymore. So I see that as a problem that they're just blind to. Like, yeah, okay, you can have a kid and he'll survive, but it's not going to be very healthy. A couple other benefits that I noticed. One is my strength. Like, I haven't really bothered trying to do any exercise. I it's just not been something I focus on. But the other day, I was at an event and everyone was encouraged to just do some push-ups. So I just went for it with everybody else. And in the past, push-ups, like I might be able to do one or two. I never did much exercise and I was very weak in my arms. And I was able to just keep doing them, no problem. Like I have a lot more strength now than I ever did before. Uh, and that's without exercise, just from changing diet. Another big thing for me is how fast time seems to go by. So when I was eating a vegan diet, it seemed like time was going very quickly. Like I'd think back to something that I would think was a week ago, and then I'd remember, no, that was actually like a couple of months ago. And now it's the other way around, where time, I'm able to be so much more aware and present in my daily life that I remember more, and it seems like there's more time in each day, if that makes sense.
I
In
have the
addition,
same experience. I know
yeah,
exactly what you mean.
okay. And in addition, not having to sleep as much is a part of that probably, but yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to talk about how, like, because I have, since going vegan, I'd gone back to eating meat like several times, but then I always went back. So like, for example, one time we were hanging out with some friends and there was like a barbecue. We were like homeless at the time, and we ended up going to this rainbow gathering, and we got like this big thing of like really crappy meat, like ground beef, and we ate it and we got really sick afterwards. Like we went to the camp and like cooked it up over the fire and got really sick afterwards. And there's like different experiences like that that I would just I would put things in a box in my head to make it look like meat was the thing that was causing a problem because that's what I heard. But it wasn't actually what was going on. So like the belief that I assimilated just kind of like was kind of like a filter or a wall that kept me from just seeing things normally, which I feel like is part of the reason why I'm able to see things in a much more clear way since I've made this shift. But for me, it was it was a big step to go from being vegan to just eating all meat and being comfortable with it and owning it. And I feel like that might be like an experience that a lot of people have that have been very much into veganism or vegetarianism or whatever, making that shift, like the whole process of it. Like, I wanted to talk about that a little bit because at first I felt like a little bit of sadness, like I told you about. I almost like was grieving over the animal. And once I got that out of my system, I feel like it was gone.
So what was that like for you? Because I know we went to this farm, like she said earlier, and saw like the hanging carcasses, and then on the way home she was just crying.
Like I felt really lightheaded when I was in there, and because it's not something that I'd really been exposed to. I always told myself as a vegan that the reason I don't eat meat is because I wouldn't be comfortable doing it myself, like slaughtering the animal, and that. So like if I were able to do that myself, it would be fine. But since I'm not doing it, I'm having someone else do it, then it's not like a natural thing. So I always told myself that. But then we went in and we saw the carcasses, and I was like, really, like, I don't want to have to do this, but it feels right. It feels like my heart's telling me to do this. But I was honestly like, I just had this deep emotion. Like I've always had that's one of my gifts in a sense. It depends on how I choose to use it, is the power of the emotion and the energy therein. But like it took me a little while to process that. But once I did, it was a great freedom. It was just removing something that I'd assimilated that wasn't a part of me. It's like taking off a hat or something that's like making you uncomfortable and like it like has weights on it. I don't know how to describe it, but like it just felt like a weight had been lifted off me once I grieved for that animal, and I just finally let it go, and it felt really good. But in order to get to that point, I just put myself through so much suffering over time. I just like really pushed it to an extreme because I wanted it to be true. Like it's just like kind of like this fairy tale idea that we can just eat fruits and not hurt anybody, and I don't know, just eat fruits and milk was my next idea. I'll put some milk in there because you don't have to kill the cow to get the milk out. But then, and I always believe that too, that like if you're going to have milk, then don't kill the cow, because that's what they kind of teach in Hinduism nowadays. And like some people will protect the cows until they're older and let them die naturally, and the leather is from the cows that have died naturally. Anyways, but it took a major paradigm shift. It took me going through that and pushing through it, and I think for a lot of people that can be a little bit difficult. So I guess the things that obviously seeing somebody else that has done it is very useful, like hearing stories of different people that you've shared, or just people on the internet or people that I've known. Hearing those stories is kind of empowering because then it's like, okay, somebody else has done it. Somebody else can eat like a lamb heart or something. I don't know. So I can do it too. How
did you make that emotional shift though? Like how did you let go of all that, as you said?
Well, I had to allow myself to feel it that one day. And then because the emotion is not like, it's not like, obviously there's some emotion if something dies, whether it's a plant or an animal, but I really realized that like everything's conscious. The plants are conscious, the animals are conscious, and I get to follow my heart no matter what that means. I'm not going to put a restriction on what my heart is saying because it's an animal or a plant, just because I'm saying that like, this cow is more important than this mouse or like whatever. Like my own judgments had gotten in my way. But for me, it took so much suffering to realize that it wasn't working. Despite me doing everything else in my life great. Like having learned so much in this past year and having been exposed to very powerful people and experiences, I got out of this amazing experience. My son had just been born, and I just totally like, I was like having like a panic attack because I was so hungry. Like, and it seems kind of silly now.
Yeah.
But at the time, like I was just so convinced that what I was doing was natural and normal.
That's when you wanted the vegan cheese.
Yeah,
and
I was literally like, no, this is crazy, but I was literally like, because he was eating this way, he was basically vegan, and I felt like I just didn't want to do it deep inside, and I was like literally considering like leaving, but I was like, no, I'm not going to do that because that's not what my heart is saying. But I was like, I just can't do this anymore. It's so strange, but I'm grateful I had that experience because I went through all of that. Now I know. Now I know how to listen to my own natural knowing, and I feel like the body is very miraculous in how much it can heal and repair. I feel so much better in just a couple months.
Yeah.
At first I was a little bit like, shit, I fucked up my body. This is not good. Like my teeth are falling apart, my bones hurt, I can't get up, like I have pain everywhere, my skin is horrible. But I'm doing fine now. Like I feel honestly better than I have like in a long time. My brain fog is going away, which that was a huge thing for me, was that I just can't focus in my life. Was never able to accomplish what I wanted because I had so much brain fog and fatigue, and I'm experiencing that's going away. And it's just like my natural knowing always knows what's best. And I feel like for anybody out there who is experiencing issues with what they're eating, or just some kind of unhealthy relationship with food, or they're vegan and something isn't working, like ultimately it just takes facing it and being completely honest with what's going on. Like, this is not working. Let's see what other options there are, and at least see what it does. It's made a huge difference for me. And it's not like food is that important, but when I'm trying to do this artificial thing and go against my nature, it does have an effect on everything else in my life, for sure.
Yeah, I think for me, I always viewed it a little differently. Like ethically it was different. Like, because I view all life as equal, whether it's a plant or an animal, it's still life. Like, we can't live without consuming some kind of life. So I think thinking about it that way made it a little easier for me to transition. It was just, I told myself, this is not food for so long. Like, meat's not food. That's gross. It's like the vegans say, it's putrefying flesh. It's putrefying dead flesh as soon as you kill it, right? I watched a video the other day, and a vegan had said that, when you cut open a coconut, it smells like coconut. You cut open an animal, it smells like rotten, putrefying flesh. And no, it doesn't. It smells like a fresh killed animal. It's totally different.
It smells like a cow.
But that's the message that I'd convinced myself as well. Like, it's rotting, decaying flesh.
It's crazy. Like, you hear something over and over again, people saying it over and over again, and then you just start to kind of believe it. But just going and like having that experience with the like processing the cow and everything, and it's something completely different. I just feel like because I grew up in an environment that was very urban and very isolated from nature, that I never really was connected to my foods in that way. And so there's kind of like this idea out there that like, there's all these ideas out there about what's best for people to do, but it's not real. It's just, I don't know. And just since, I think it's really cool that just by eating a whole animal, for example, like, don't have to ship my food in from anywhere. I can support a local farmer that's doing an amazing job and doing something that's like works and isn't completely unsustainable, and it's something that is very nourishing and healing, and
we're not any longer supporting like any of the whole system, really. Like, we don't really buy very much at the store now. Like, we buy some fish from time to time, but since we got the whole cow, like,
you can get everything from the farmer.
We're not
eggs,
going to
fish.
The store and supporting all this commercialism and shipping and stuff from all over the place, and then
I don't ever feel like I gotta go and eat something that I know isn't like a natural food for me,
Yeah.
like like rice and grains or like fake meat, or I don't feel that because I actually feel satisfied. Like,
Yeah, even just
just
eating for the last few weeks anyways, we've been eating pretty much only beef because we have a lot of it. And there's no desire for anything else. It's fine. That's enough. It's if I were to eat just watermelons, I would be wanting something else because it wouldn't be enough. Or if I was to eat any one vegan food, really, right? It wouldn't be enough on its own. But I feel like just one animal food is enough, and it's nice to have some variety, but it's also not necessary. I don't feel a need for it.
I think one really cool thing is
That's
just
the
how like
difference.
the human body is like really resilient and flexible to all kinds of different environments. And so we can be eating like my son was joking about earlier, an all bread diet. You can do that for a little while. It might not, like the human body is very resilient. Like I was able to have, my children, at least now they're all extremely healthy, and I've had very easy birth process and everything. Um, but like I feel like regardless of that, um, it does take a toll. Like even though my body was able to do it and create a perfect, beautiful baby, like it took a toll on my own body by
Yeah.
being out of integrity and by forcing myself to do something that was clearly not natural.
And ignoring your
Ignoring my
natural
natural. That's ultimately what it
desires.
comes down to. Like if you're a vegan and if I'm a vegan and I'm going to a grocery store to get like some vegan cheese or vegan meat or just something that like tastes like meat or anything like that, like ultimately it's like, what am I doing?
It's absurd.
I'm kind of like lying to
Yeah.
myself, or like a rice milk or whatever it is. Anything that's trying to imitate another food, a fake egg. Like these are things that even as a health conscious like vegan, I feel like people get hungry and then end up going to those
Yeah.
foods that are like processed because
Yeah.
like
Usually we try to avoid them. I always found like vegan meat like absurd. Like if you want to eat meat, just eat meat. But there were times that we did have it, and it was always like that. We'd be getting our normal foods or something, and then, oh, that sounds tasty.
sounds like meat.
It's still vegan, so let's have that experience.
But it never felt good. Like
No,
vegetable oils and
it's
all that
full
stuff
of
doesn't feel great.
they're
No.
full of vegetable oil, like a lot of it.
There's a guy who's only been eating apples for 3 years because he claims that humans should only eat apples.
We were getting a bunch of apples because none of the other fruit was good. That's why I said I don't want to eat another apple. It's just like not a like if you do it, like anyone can do this. You can go in and try to eat only apples or only sweet potatoes or whatever, and just really honestly ask, am I satisfied with this? Am I feeling healthy? Am I feeling good? And my answer was always no.
I'm
Um,
surprised you could
so
live for 3 years on apples.
There's a
yeah,
guy who only ate coconuts also for even longer. He got severely sick, very mentally ill in the end. Yeah.
Uh,
yeah, I think I've heard of that. Like, and I've always
yeah,
like I've watched different people that are like raw food people on YouTube in the past, like for example like the Life Regenerator and Dr. Morse and like a bunch of people. Um, but ultimately like we were making a decision, right? We were like, all right, what are we going to do next? This is not working. And then they're like saying, okay, sprout your nuts and seeds and make nut yogurt.
culture
And I'm
thing,
like,
yeah,
no, if my body wants to have yogurt, why don't I just have yogurt?
yeah,
Like, and then they're saying that it comes from like the Essene Gospel of Peace or something, but
yeah.
it doesn't really.
Yeah, like
It's
he was
just
saying that you
they're
have
not
to
even
take
vegan. I don't know.
you have to buy like take nuts, but you can't eat nuts, so you have to
Sprout them,
culture
and
them
that's what people
to
have
make them
done with grains
digestible.
and nuts and seeds. Like
Um,
maybe if there's not anything else available, fine, but like
yeah, you can live on it, but it doesn't. It's not.
I
How does that seem
honestly,
natural?
yeah, I don't know.
Like,
I've never like we've done the fermented grains and fermented beans, but it didn't seem to be any better for me personally.
and it doesn't make sense that we should have to eat foods. Our natural diet would be foods that we have to put through some difficult process to make so we can even eat them. That's just
Which is
never.
what people have always done with all like the starchy foods, but they don't really do that anymore.
Yeah,
Like the whole grains and stuff like that. I feel like that's actually probably the worst thing to have just like a plain brown rice, and it's not very digestible to humans, in my experience at least.
yeah. And if I imagine myself like in the wilderness, I'm not going to be picking seeds off of some grass to like the grains, right? It's just it would be too tedious.
That's like a
I might
last
eat a
resort.
fruit here and there. I might find a fruit tree and eat a bunch of fruit one day. But otherwise, like there's lots of animals in nature. There's much less abundance of fruit, and there's a lot more competition for it as well. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, just and then from like the whole spiritual perspective of like, oh yeah, it's like um, as humanity progresses more and more, they'll eat meat less. Like I think that like from my experience now, that's just a bunch of nonsense. Like I don't know, maybe it's possible to sort like for people to no longer required to eat food and transcend. I don't know. I haven't experienced that personally, but I don't
good
think the
luck.
path to get there is I don't know. I just think the whole thing doesn't make sense to me anymore at all, based on my own experience, and I just feel like natural knowing all the time, no matter what, like my natural knowing and diet and everything else is always going to be superior than listening to somebody else's opinion or somebody else's belief or whatever.
Yeah,
That's kind of the mindset of some vegans, as being better than nature or transcending and so on.
Right.
Believing that you can not eat animal foods or not even eat food at all. Stuff like
yeah,
that.
Yeah,
yeah,
I've heard that before. It's like, well, that's the future, but
yeah.
humanity's going this way now, and we're not going to have to do any of that stuff anymore because I am going to the future.
Yeah, we
Um,
actually considered that towards the end of our veganism, like, because what we were doing was not working, and like, so, and we'd do fasting sometimes and see some benefit from that. It was probably just from cutting out the plant toxins for a while, but so we were actually like looking on YouTube at people claiming to be breatharian, but I think it's just the biggest lie, the biggest joke.
Some
Um,
people have died who tried to follow it.
yeah, yeah,
well, and in any case, if you somehow are like a translated spiritual being or whatever, I don't know, that's a different thing. Like that's not something I have experience with, and I don't necessarily think anybody else probably has either. But like trying to force something is kind of silly. I feel like
yeah.
trying to
I don't
pretend
know.
that we're something that we're not. That's
Yeah,
what
I
it comes
think
down to.
I think people just lie. I don't believe it.
Yeah,
You
I
know.
mean, I don't know. I know that like that
And then
there's
there's people that say like they don't really need to eat food, but they eat it once in a while just because it's a nice experience. I think that's so when they're caught, they can say, "Oh yeah, this is my once a week meal."
I don't know. I haven't experienced that. All I know is what I've experienced, but I know that like it's interesting though because I have eaten meat before, but I still didn't really feel all the way better with like the health issues that I'd had, which is why I told myself it wasn't
Yeah,
it. But I wasn't eating all meat. Like I wasn't eating mostly meat. I was eating mostly plants with some meat.
yeah. Well,
Um,
that's the thing too, right? Most people are eating a plant-based diet without even realizing it, and and a lot of that's highly processed, like white flour and so forth. So. Or sugar is a very common thing in the standard diet, and I think those are big contributions.
but I think if as long as somebody will then just take out everybody else's opinion and just focus in on the actual results of what I'm doing, what I'm eating, whatever, then the truth becomes very apparent. It's only when we like try to take in everybody else's experience and like block out our own experience that we get really confused. And it's
Yeah,
just interesting how people are so confused about what to eat in general.
yeah, it's the
Like
biggest dilemma
it's
for
like how
everybody.
can it be that hard? Like no other animals or creatures have an issue knowing what to eat, right? So I don't know.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, you both, for sharing your journey.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.